Special issue, Can They Garnish My Social Security? By yourlegallegup.com. Brought to you by Kenneth Chabert at yourlegallegup.com. Your advantage if you're being sued by debt collectors. If you are an elderly or disabled American, or are receiving Social Security for any other reason, you may fear that debt collectors could seize or garnish your income. The debt collectors may have suggested they could, or that they would do that if you didn't pay them. So the question is, can they do that? And the short answer to that question, as to whether debt collectors can garnish Social Security, is that no, they can't. But you do need to listen to the rest of the answer because it's more complicated than that. Section 207 of the Social Security Act provides that none of the monies paid or payable shall be subject to execution, levy, attachment, garnishment, or other legal process. That means that Social Security money is not attachable, and incidentally, you can't assign it for any reason either. So, according to the statute, you should be untouchable. And that was certainly the intention of the Act. However, as with so many things in the law, the simple answer to a question is usually only the beginning of the question. The debt collectors find ways to work around this sometimes. So let's get to the real answer. And to do that, let's start by considering the way bank accounts are seized or garnished. Sometimes I call it attached or executed on. They all basically mean the same thing, i.e. that someone is going to the bank and making them hold the money and then hand it over to that person. So it starts when someone obtains a judgment against another person. As I've pointed out before, these judgments often come as a result of defaults in the process, or default judgments, all too often against people who never owed anybody any money. But once there's a judgment, it is collectible. And what happens is the collectors go to the supposed debtor's bank and they serve what's called a notice of garnishment on the bank, including some questions identifying funds that the bank might be holding for you. Those are called interrogatories. What you need to know is that they do this without providing any notice of that fact, or the facts, to the debtor himself or herself. This is strictly between the creditor, the debt collector, and the bank itself. The garnishment takes effect immediately. It freezes the account as soon as the papers are served on the bank. And that means that after the garnishment papers are served, the bank will not honor any checks that are written against the account unless the account balance happens to be larger than the debt owed. And they'll hold them until the account becomes unfrozen for one reason or another. Much of that time, you won't even know that anything is happening. Eventually, the bank will get around to sending notice to the debtor. As far as I can tell, the bank is rarely in a hurry to do this. They'll be charging NSF fees, non-sufficient funds fees, for every check that bounces, which they all will do. It's a tremendous windfall for the bank. So a few days after the process has begun, the horrified debtor learns that his or her checks have all been bouncing. Huge fees have been accumulating. Every check will bounce, creating a fee at the bank, and probably fees and annoyed creditors with other people who are trying to cash the checks. So you need to remember that frozen accounts mean no money, even if the money cannot legally be garnished. You can't get it. In most, or even all states, I don't really know, the banks hold the assets they seize for a period of time before turning them over to the debt collector. During this time, the debtor can, if they have the resources and emotional presence of mind, challenge and stop the garnishment. And this is supposedly the due process that you're required before your money gets taken away. But it all takes time at best. And during this time, a person of limited income could be evicted or could be unable to purchase medicine or other essentials. And the banks are charging fees during all of this time, which they may or may not ever return. There have been a number of news stories out of New York City and elsewhere. The debt collectors were garnishing the bank accounts of the elderly, whose accounts were undeniably largely and often exclusively made up of Social Security payments. During the litigation to decide what money could be garnished, the elderly were facing homelessness and other deprivations, and hundreds of thousands in New York and millions nationwide were subjected to extreme hardship and crisis. Some of them died. And this probably raises constitutional questions, although I'm not aware of any cases that have dealt with the issue. For more of this tragic and horrifying story, read an article called "Unholy Alliance of Bank and Collection Agency Fleeces Social Security Recipients" by Laura Rowley, written in November of 2007. If you want to get the site of that, you can go to my website and read the article, read my article, which contains the hyperlink to that article. If you do read the Rowley article, you'll notice that all the dispossessed had one thing in common. All the elderly in the story were trying to work with the debt collectors. They were trying to pay, and they were paying. And of course, this is why the debt collectors knew where their bank accounts were. Don't you make the same mistake. You can work with them, with the debt collectors, but don't allow them to know where your money is. In New York State, landmark legislation is now protecting the elderly. You can go to my site for my full article and references in it to other articles, if you'd like. However, the protections don't extend beyond New York. Thus, you may be at risk if your city or state has not passed similar laws. And I am not aware of any states that have, incidentally. So here's a possible solution you could try. If the debt collectors know about your bank accounts, you definitely face a similar risk. So the solution could be to have two different bank accounts, one of which is exclusively funded by Social Security or other exempt payments, and the other which is not. Notify the bank receiving Social Security payments that the account consists exclusively of Social Security payments. And I would also suggest that the account should be in different banks. If you can pull that off, it's better. And information regarding the non-exempt accounts should never be given to the debt collectors. And I would actually go even one step further and suggest that you have several different bank accounts if you can manage it. That way you're dividing your risk more effectively. W.C. Fields was said to be holding hundreds, if not thousands, of bank accounts all through the country, which created a nightmare for his heirs when he died, without telling anybody where those accounts were. I'm not suggesting you go quite that far, but the more you divide up your money, the harder it will be for the debt collectors to get it. And remember, you need to put it in different banks, because the way the garnishment process works is they serve the papers, the interrogatories, on the bank without identifying the bank account. They leave it to the bank to identify the bank account. So if you have 5 accounts in the bank, one of which happens to be exempted, it may be that your exempt account will be, untouched, and all the others will be taken. But it's also possible to all be taken. Whereas if you have lots of different accounts in lots of different banks, if they happen to find one, if they happen to serve garnishment papers on one of the banks, then you'll still have your money in the other accounts. So to take it one further step, this all means that if you're going to use money from one of the non-exempt accounts, and really that's true, this is true of even the exempt accounts, just to be safe. But if you're going to pay the debt collector on a troubled account, then you should strongly consider, and I would recommend, turning the money into a postal money order rather than sending a check. And a still safer approach would be to make all your payments with money orders. But we're mostly talking about a time when trouble is kind of on the horizon. You can see it coming, and you'll probably have some idea of which accounts are the most trouble. You want to make sure that, if, let's say you've got trouble paying a Citibank credit card bill, you just want to make sure that you don't give Citibank the information they need to garnish you later. Remember, they'll have it if you ever give it to them. They'll keep it forever. So to reiterate, when should you take these actions? Well, whenever you see trouble brewing, it's best to put your money in different places before the trouble develops. But it's still a good idea to do even if you wait until there's a judgment against you. The problem there is that you may not have enough time to get it done, because sometimes it can be difficult to transfer automatic payments and all that stuff. So it can be difficult to set up if you're doing it in a big hurry. But if there's a judgment against you, it still makes a lot of good sense to go right ahead and change them, because they will be coming after that money. Okay, so you might want to check to see if in your jurisdiction moving your money into different accounts after a judgment could be illegal. I'm not aware of any place where that would be so, but it's possible that in some jurisdictions it would be considered, defrauding the creditors. I don't really think so, but that would be a possibility. And notice that I'm not suggesting that you should lie about where your accounts are if the judgment creditor gets around to serving formal discovery on you and asking. Now, that would be perjury if you have to sign an affidavit, but actually it seems to be rare for them to get around to that process. And again, that's because they don't think you have very much money. And so they don't want to spend very much money trying to get whatever you happen to have. So as long as you never let them think otherwise, they're always doing kind of a delicate balancing act of costs and benefits. How much does it cost to get the little amount that you can give them? So finally, these actions may not completely eliminate the risk of debt collectors tying up or getting your Social Security or other exempt funds which are exempt from debt collection. But they go a long way towards protecting you from some of the most extreme consequences of debt collector damage. And you're going to need to stay on your toes and make sure that if they do happen to go after exempt funds, that you can, take steps to stop them from doing that. The papers that inform you of the garnishment, which you will eventually get, those will tell you how you should preserve your rights to the money. If you get notice from your bank that you're being garnished, but you do not get notice from the debt collector, then you're going to need to go to the court and look up your file and get the information there. This is not a place where you want to sit on your rights. If they don't give it to you, you need to track it down and aggressively pursue your rights. To get more help on fighting debt collectors and their lawsuits, go to yourlegallegup.com. Get my litigation manual and forms, and defend yourself from the debt collectors.